Hi, everybody. I'm Donald Beard. I'm the park superintendent at Caprock Canyon State Park. I've been at the park for about 12 years now. I just was telling Suzanne the story of how I got there, and that's a whole nother presentation one of these days, maybe. But for those of you that don't know, Caprock Canyon State Park is in the bottom part of the Texas Panhandle. It's about 90 miles from Lubbock, and it's about 90 miles from Amarillo. It's kind of a triangle between those two cities and us. About 4.5 hours from where we sit right now in Fort Worth. It's an amazing park. This is normally where I ask people to raise their hands if they've ever been to Caprock. I've got a couple here. Awesome. Great. So I hope there's a bunch of hands being raised out there in Zoom land as well. If not, you definitely need to come to Kittiquay. That's how we say the name of the town. You need to come to Kittiquay and see us. It's a beautiful place. And I think that anybody who is a Texan should experience that. It's a pretty awesome place. So let's talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk about these guys right here first. That's okay, so these are the North American bison. Historically, there would have been somewhere between 30 to 60 million bison roaming the Great Plains of North America. So first of all, let me stop right here. I'm going to I'm going to pause the presentation just so I can apologize up front. This is we can try to is that showing on the screen, or is it just on ours? I think it's just on ours.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So I'm apologizing up front because this is the first time I have done public speaking since the pandemic. So I'm so excited to be getting back to normal, but I know this is going to be very rusty. So just be patient with me, please. So anyway, back to what I was saying, 30 to 60 million bison roaming the plains of North America. That is from Canada down into Mexico. Huge swath of land runs right through the middle of North America. And it was the historical home of the bison. So if you were on the plains, several hundred years ago, you might see something like this: Native Americans, indigenous man hunting bison. If you look at it real close, you'll see that they are barefoot and have sharp pointy sticks, and they're hunting bison.
I just noticed start video is off. So if you'd like to be seen. There you go.
Well, there we go. Now y'all can see me. Maybe. There I am. And there I went. For some reason it's stopping.
Huh. Okay.
Well, then okay. Sure. Well, you got a glimpse of me anyway. So anyway, you would have seen the Native Americans hunting bison out on the plains, barefooted with sharp, pointy sticks. Now, those guys were tough. To be able to hunt a 2,000-pound bison bull, barefooted and just using a stick, a sharp stick, that's pretty tough. But they did it. They had to do it. That's how they made their living. They got everything they needed from the bison. They used all parts of the bison at one point or another. They would use the hides for shelter, for clothing. They would use bones for tools. They would use bladders. They would make bowls and water carrying bowls out of them. So, they had uses for most, if not all, of the bison themselves. Then, get this thing to work. While we're stopping. Again, we're going to be rusty. Stop working.
I wonder if the battery's low.
Okay, we'll do it this way. No, it's frozen. That's what it is.
Oh.
Our presentation is frozen.
I wonder if I messed something up when I tried to start video.
All right, so we got another little pause here. Bathroom break time. nothing out of this thing. Okay.
There we go.
Not sure what we did, but we've got some movement now. Okay. So now what you've got is you've got the Native Americans hunting bison. This is how they made their living. Okay. And then once you see these guys start moving in, that's when we started having problems. These guys being the commercial hunters. Okay. They did it for other reasons other than sustenance. It was an economy, basically. So I put together a few numbers just to show what happened. And this is just in the Texas. Okay, so hold on just a second. Don't tell anybody, but I opened the wrong PowerPoint. Okay, we're going to start again. We're going to skip through to right here, and we're going to have a little pop quiz.
So I think you need to reshare it.
Okay, so how do you share screen again?
So you'll have to minimize that. And then there.
Good job.
Okay, are we back up now?
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm backing up a little bit, and we're going to have a little pop quiz. And everybody here knows the answer to this one. Are we talking about buffalo? Or are we talking about bison? Of course, we're talking about bison. Okay. This animal is a North American bison. These are the buffaloes. Okay. The African Cape buffalo or the Asian water buffalo. This is what the European explorers knew as buffalo. And when they came to our continent, saw our animals, it looked a little similar. So they, picked up the word buffalo. And that's one of the reasons why they're called buffalo today. So the numbers, we went through those already, 30 to 60 million bison. A couple of quotes that I want to read. These are really interesting quotes that I picked up that I think are very valuable. From the top of the ridge, they could see 15 miles or more in the distance. The view reminded them of the ocean where water and skies seemed to join. From their vantage point, they saw buffalo, more than either man had ever seen. As far as they could see were buffalo scattered in herds of various sizes. Now, this was written in 1870. And I've read accounts of bison herds that would stretch 10 miles wide and 100 miles long. Just, if you're standing on top of a hill looking out in the Texas Panhandle, all you could see would be bison. It's just amazing the pure number of animals that once inhabited North America. Here's another one. This is a really good one. And it's actually, I've got a friend who lives in this area, and this may even been on his ranch. But an old buffalo hunter remembered a time he was camped on the banks of Beaver Creek in western Kansas. He said the stream was 6 feet wide and about 6 inches deep with swiftly running water. A buffalo herd came to the creek above our camp and drank it dry. For hours, the creek bed was dry until the great herd passed by. Think about that. All the water that would be running down that creek, 6 foot wide, 6 inches deep, with swiftly running water. And they drank so much that it stopped running for hours. That's a lot of bison, a lot of water. So we talked about these guys hunting with sharp sticks. And then once horses came back to North America, they became better at hunting. They were able to kill more bison, harvest more for food and teepees and whatnot. And even from Mexico, they would come up from Mexico and hunt bison. Basically what I'm saying is that for a long time, people were hunting bison. We've got a bison kill site in Caprock Canyon State Park that dates native man hunting bison in the Texas Panhandle over 10,000 years.
Wow.
Oh.
Okay. We've been hunting bison for a long time with no problems. The population was doing well. It wasn't until these guys came along that we started having the problem. These guys, like I said, were the white hunters, the commercial hunters. And the numbers that I put together to show what the damage they did and how fast they did it. The destruction of the southern herd. From 1872 to 74, there were over 3 million bison killed in Dodge City and the surrounding area. Same time period, almost 400,000 were killed by Native Americans for the hide trade. So even the Native Americans got into the hide trade at a small level, but they did. They got into a hide trade. 1872, more than 20,000 were killed in the Texas Panhandle in 1 year. That same year, another 150,000 were killed by settlers, not necessarily for the hide trade, but just for whatever reason. So a total in about 3 years was about 3.7 million bison. That's over 10% or so of all the bison in a 3-year period. And that was just in the southern herd. They did the same thing in the northern herd. So it was, you could see it didn't take long to really decimate the population. This is a really interesting photo. It's a buffalo hunter's camp. And I will say that I use the word buffalo sometimes, okay? Especially when I'm talking about historic stuff like this. I will use the word buffalo. I will use the word bison. If I'm in a room full of bison conservationists, I'm probably going to use the word bison more, you know? But it really doesn't matter. They really don't care what you call them, okay? If you want to be completely accurate, they are bison. But if I say, Suzanne, do you know what a buffalo is? You know what a buffalo is. And you know what a bison is. So it's okay. It doesn't hurt their feelings. So anyway, back to the bison hunters camp. If you look at this, there's a lot going on right here. They've got hides that are staked out, drying out. Some of them been scraped. Got a nice wheel for sharpening their knives. And then they've got all this meat hanging down here. Y'all know what that is?
Testicles?
Lingua.
Oh, lingua.
Tongue.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they would harvest the tongue and the hide. Those would be the two main items that they would take from the bison. The tongue was a delicacy back north.
Did they use the meat at all?
I'm sure they would cut out some steaks and cook them when they needed to eat, that type of thing. But for the most part, the meat was left to rot. You know, there was no market for it. The market was for the hides and for the tongues, and that was about it. And speaking of the hides, do we know why there was such a market for them? I mean, everybody's heard that we killed out the bison to tame the Native Americans, and there is some truth to that, without a doubt, okay? The military took advantage of an economy that was happening and used it to their advantage. But I don't believe that was the main goal or main reason for the slaughter of the bison. The main reason for the slaughter of the bison population was due to the Industrial Revolution. They would take those hides and they would use them for belts back in the sweatshops back in the East. They figured out that leather worked really good for belting materials to run the sweatshops. You know, everybody's seen the picture where you got one huge machine and all these belts coming off of it to these little smaller machines. Mm-hmm. That's what they would do with the belts.
So like thrashing machine type belts.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So they say that you could smell these camps for miles away, and I think that's true. Well, first of all, you know, these guys don't take a bath that often, so they don't smell very good, but there was a lot of spoilage. You know, I mean, we didn't have the techniques we have today to take care of meat or hides. So you know that there was a lot of spoilage. I've never read anywhere that shows the percentage of hides that actually made it to market versus the ones that were spoiled. And I'm sure they got pretty good at it because it was their money, but you know, there was still some spoilage. So this is a photo of a bison cow being skinned. I'm sure that dog made use of a lot of the meat. This is what would be left. This is what would be dotted the plains. And can you imagine? I mean, I've smelt one of those. Can you imagine what thousands of them smelled like?
Wow.
I can imagine that it was pretty rank.
I've seen that picture.
Yeah, this is a pretty famous picture, but if you look at it real close, that's just skulls. That's not any other part of the skeleton. That's just skulls. That's a lot of skulls. About 40,000 hides getting ready to ship. Even the trains got into it. Okay. So the herds, remember me saying they would be 100 miles long, 10 miles wide. Well, when they crossed the railroad line, the train would have to stop. So the railroads were losing money. So they decided they would just start excursions out into the plains, take people out and let them shoot bison. This was not for the trade. This is not for meat. This is just wanton slaughter. This is just shooting bison. Sometimes they didn't even get off the train. They would just shoot out the windows. And there's no telling how many of those were shot. This is a very interesting map here. This is from William Hornaday's book. This map was done in the 1890s, I believe. And I know you guys, nobody can read it. I understand. We can't even read it here on the screen. But what it does is it shows the historic range of bison. And this outside orangish reddish line was the original range from Mexico all the way up to Canada, almost coast to coast. And the numbers represent dates. And as the dates get closer and closer to present time, the range shrinks. So you'll see 1700s out here over in the Kentucky, Virginia, up in that area. And as you go in towards Missouri and Nebraska and all that, you'll see the 1800s. So as we get closer and closer to present time, the range would shrink, and then you'll have this blue line that shows up here and this blue line that shows here. That is the distinction between the northern herd and the southern herd. Now, why do you think that there was a split? I see some puzzled looks, and I'm sure there might be somebody out there yelling at me, telling me the answer, but I can't hear you, so sorry. But what that is the railroad. That's where the railroad went through. Okay?
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
So it's not saying that the bison stopped crossing railroad tracks. They did. But the disruption caused by the trains and the people shooting and all that activity caused a shift in their migratory patterns to where some of these animals stayed up here and some of these animals stayed down here.
Wow.
There was definitely overlap. I mean, that's not a distinct line. You're not going to go out there and find a spot, oh, there was bison right here, but there were no bison right here. You're not going to see that.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a shift caused by the railroad that created the northern and southern herd.
So the larger line, the larger scope of bison populations, do we know that before those lines were drawn, did they go coast to coast?
This represents what Hornaday researched and found as the main range. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't show any bison down here on the Texas coast, but there were bison found in Galveston. Okay, and then there were probably bison in Georgia and northern Florida. I mean, so yeah, they did go there, but their range is more inside the area than outside. Okay, so now we've got the blue lines. Now next you look at this and you'll see some black circles. And those black circles represent basically the foundation herds that all bison today come from. You know, you'll have a little bit of Yellowstone. There's Texas Panhandle. There's some over here in Colorado. Those are the herds that all bison come from today. That's when you would have seen something like this. Okay, you would have had a fawn. I was looking at the fawn. It says fawn there. You would have had a calf that would be out there roaming the plains by itself. And the reason is because the hunters would shoot the moms, shoot the cows, but they wouldn't shoot the calves because the bullet was worth more than the calf was. So they wouldn't waste the bullets on the calves. So they leave those calves to just go out and starve or get eaten by predators. That is what spurred on, so that during that time, the survey was done, 1895, 541 animals left. So we started somewhere between 30 to 60 million. 1895, there's about 541 left. And that's when they were in those little remnant populations. That's what stirred on these people right here, particularly the lady, Mary Ann Goodnight. She would hear those calves crying at nighttime, and she would hear the gunshots during the daytime. And she told her husband, Charles, we've got to do something. We've got to do something about these animals, or we're going to lose them. Now, Charles, I don't know if he was a good conservationist or if he just got tired of hearing his wife cry. I'm not sure. Probably a little bit of both. But he went out and rounded up a couple of bison, and his hands went out and caught a few more. And they figured out a pretty neat trick to get the bison calves to follow their horses in. They didn't have to rope them. They could go out there and kind of cut them. And of course, those calves are motherless, so they're looking for somebody, right? And they'd get in front of them, and those calves would just follow them back when they found one. And that they started with 5 to 7 animals. We don't know exactly how many. In 1878, that's when he started that herd. And that herd are the herd that we have at Caprock are the direct descendants of those 5 to 7 animals. That is what's amazing about these animals that we have at Caprock. They are Texas bison. They are bison that were started in that area, in the Palo Duro Canyon area, in the Caprock Canyon area. All that was part of the original JA Ranch. So we don't know exactly where those calves were caught, but they were caught in that area. So where they live now is their ancestral homeland. That's where they've always been. That's what's really cool about it. One of the things that's really cool. Charles was a big guy. He was pretty formidable. He was set in his ways. He was strong. He was you didn't want to cross him. He didn't put up with any kind of cursing, gambling, drinking in his bunkhouses. He didn't. If he caught you doing any of those, you were fired. You were gone. He made everybody toe the line. He had developed friendships with the Native Americans. Him and Quanah Parker were really good friends. He made his own treaty with the Comanches. And during the time when they were on the reservation and starving, he let them have some beef. They were able to come cut some animals out for their food. He was definitely a showman. He knew how to market. He was a marketer. I believe, this is just my theory, but I think that bull was already dead. I think that was a staged photograph. I don't have no way of proving that, but I don't know of too many bison that would let you do, wild bison anyway, that would let you do that.
Yeah.
So that's when we came on board. So Goodnight, he died in 1929, and his basically adopted son, Cleo Hubbard, was his ranch manager, and he took over operation of the ranch after his death. And occasionally, they were kept right on the edge of the Palo Duro Canyon, up in the town of Goodnight. And occasionally they would escape and go back down into the canyon. And Cleo, and I've heard this from his daughter, who's still alive. She has told me this story, and it's a very neat story. He would go out by himself, go back down in the canyons, find those bison, and bring them back by himself. And he had a way of doing it. And she said that he had a gun, and he made some kind of wooden bullets and loaded them really light. So it would go and it just pop them on the backside and get them going. You know, it wouldn't hurt them. It just spur them into action a little bit. And he would go get them and be back in a couple of days with a herd of bison. And this went on, you know, for several years until finally he got so old that one day he took off to go get the bison and was gone for about a week. And everybody thought he was dead. Everybody thought he died. He come up over the ridge one day with a herd of bison, and his wife was just shaking her finger at him and said, "You are not doing that again. You're done doing that." So he didn't do that again. And next time they escaped, they basically went down in the canyons and were left alone. That was, we don't know exactly, but that was sometime probably in the late 1930s. They escaped off of the ranch and became a wild herd again, roaming what was the JA Ranch. What is the JA Ranch today? Still was then too. So this went on for, you know, over 50 years. And then in 1996, the owners of the JA were at the point where they were ready to get rid of the bison. So they were going to have a big hunt. They were going to sell them off. They were going to kill them off. You know, all these things were going around what they might do. And a scientist from Germany got a hold of it, got wind of it, and he started a campaign to save these bison. Wolfgang something, I can't even remember his name. So anyway, he was successful. And so the JA Ranch called the state and said, "We want you guys to have these animals. We want the state to maintain. We want the state to come get them, take them off our ranch, take them somewhere else, maintain them." And that's what we did. Of course, it was way before me. I wasn't there. But we first had to go out, and I'm looking at the top left picture. We had to go out and find the bison in the canyon lands, rough country. We had to find them. Once we found them, then the middle picture is they're shooting them with a tranquilizer gun. It's not a rifle that shoots bullets, shooting tranquilizer. It would sedate them. We would load them into these crates, then ship them over to Caprock Canyon State Park, where they have been since 1997. And at that time, we were able to capture 32 animals. So when we brought the herd, we were successful in bringing over 32 animals. Of those 32 animals, there were very few young ones. They were mostly older. They were suffering from a breeding depression. There were some genetic issues. They hadn't been, there wasn't enough of them to be a viable population. They were dying out, basically, is what was going on.
These 32 were in addition to the herd of Goodnight's herd?
No, that was Goodnight's herd.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's all that was left.
All right.
At the highest time that we have records, he had 250 animals. But by the time we got them, they were down to 32 animals.
And you captured all of them? All that were there?
They captured, well, who knows for sure. They captured a little more than 32, but 32 actually survived and made the trip. And did we get them all? Who knows? I bet you there were some old bulls that we probably didn't get.
Yeah.
Because they will walk by themselves. So they did that genetic workup on them and found out, like I said, that there was some breeding issues, that we were having problems with them. They weren't having any calves. So what we did, and here's another one that is hard to read. Looks like a big bowl of spaghetti. But this is a lineage of the entire herd. Now, this is an old lineage. This is probably 10 years old. I think the highest number is like 119. We're in the 300s now. So there's a lot more animals. But I wouldn't be able to put it on this screen. We wouldn't be able to see anything. So to explain what this is, you've got these red ones up on top. You can't read the numbers, but there are numbers inside there. And if it's a square, that represents a bull. If it's an oval, that represents a cow. Okay? So that's the original animals from what we had in 1996. And you can trace what they did. Okay, you can see that, you know, this cow had 3 calves. If you look at that calf and you go back, you can follow it to this bull. So you can see who's doing what to who, right? We have a complete lineage of all the animals since the date we caught them. Now, there weren't too many calves being born at that time. But if you'll look at the blue ones, there's 2 blue ones right in the middle. Those are animals that we got from Ted Turner's ranch over in New Mexico. Now, so here's the deal that we had. These animals were caught in the Texas Panhandle. They're Texas animals. There's some unique genetics that are not found in any other animals in the world. The last thing we want to do is dilute those genetics. But at the same time, if we don't do something, they're all going to die. So we had to do something. So our biologists at the time set out on a search, all the bison they could find in North America, tried to find some, because bison, I mean, Goodnight did sell some animals. So the Goodnight genetics were out there. We tried to find some of those Goodnight genetics somewhere else. We could not find anything that hadn't been diluted already with Northern strain or whatever. So we just couldn't find him. What we did find, these animals over in New Mexico, and it turns out that this guy on the left here, our geneticist, Dr. Jim Durr, probably the world's most renowned bison geneticist, also does work for Ted Turner. And he knew of these animals that were up in the mountains in New Mexico that came out of Yellowstone in the 1930s. Okay. So they were brought out of Yellowstone before brucellosis, which is a disease that causes abortion. So all bison in Yellowstone now that's a huge deal. You can't just get bison out of Yellowstone. But these came out of Yellowstone in the 1930s and were forgotten about. Okay. Well, what does that have to do with us? What it has to do with us is in 1902, the Yellowstone population had been decimated by hunters as well. There were about 20 bison left in all of Yellowstone. And the federal government made a deal with Charles Goodnight, and he sold some animals to Yellowstone. So our genetics were prevalent in the Yellowstone herd. But like I said, we couldn't take any out of there, but these came out just a few decades after ours went in there. So they have a lot of the Goodnight genetics. They don't have the uniqueness, but that's okay. They were close enough we could work with them. So what we did is we brought those bulls in and we let them have some calves. And if you look, you notice how all of the lines on all the other animals go up and down. They're more vertical, whereas those 2 bulls, they're more horizontal lines. That's because they threw a lot of calves real quick. So at that time, we were deciding who was the breeding bulls. We had them separated. So we put those bulls in the pens with the cows, let them throw calves for about a year or 2, and then we took those bulls back out. We didn't want any crossbreeding, back crosses back to them. So we infused some new genetics without diluting what we had. At that point, we did a 10-year study. So we let them go for 10 years. We knew every calf that ever came out of there. So we had the ability to backtrack if we needed to. But the genetic study 10 years later showed that it absolutely was phenomenal. It helped. Our diversity is more in line with some of the other federal herds now. And we did not lose our uniqueness. So it was a complete success. It was an awesome job. Okay. So now we're going to jump forward to 2009. And that was the year that I showed up. And when I got there, if you wanted to see bison at Caprock, you were lucky, you would see something like this right here. You would see bison behind a big old fence with these big green earrings in them. Now, they had it. I'm not talking bad about any of our past people because they had to do that because of the genetic issues. The management was pretty intense back then, but we were successful in that endeavor, and now it's time to start turning them back into bison. These are fuzzy cows with earrings. We want bison. So we started working on a project to get the bison back out into the park. There were about 50 or so at this time, 50 to 70.
No way.
And we started working immediately, and it took us about a year to get the first part of the fence complete. These are some really cool pictures right here. This to me is history. This is James. He's our lead ranger, and he's getting ready to cut the fence. That's the fence that they were kept behind. We call it Jurassic fence.
Yeah.
I mean, you could run T-Rexes in that thing. I mean, it's way overbuilt for bison, but you know, it worked for sure. So anyway, here we go. We're cutting the fence. You can see them in the background there. Making a new gate for us to release them into the park itself.
So was this 2009?
This is 2011. This is September of 2011. We were done. We got the fence and project done. It took about a year for us to even convince Austin to even let us do this. And then it took about a year for us to work on the fence and get it ready. So we're 2 years down the road from when I got there. So here we are, we're ready. We got the gate open, or the opening done. We've got the gates, we let them out. So I had this in my mind, you know, I've got this all set up. I've got all these people coming. I've got VIPs from Austin. I got county officials, state officials, you know, local officials. I've got our own videographer and camera guy. I don't know if you guys know Wyman Menzer. We had him out there, and he took some photographs. So, and I've got some VIPs. You know, this is going to be an amazing thing that we're going to see here, right? So we let them out. They come out. There's Wyman, and there's our videographer, Bruce. They come out, and they look at, you know, what's going on. Kind of look around a little bit. Then they turn around and run back in. They did. They ran back in. I got on the radio and I said, I hope you got some pictures. We're done for the day. But I've got a really good bison herdsman. He was able to go out and coax them back in, or back out into the new pasture. So they came back out, started looking around, seeing the tall grass, even made their way down to the lake. You know, okay, so let me just interject this. So these bison, this is in 2011. These bison have been in that pasture since 1998. Most of those animals were born in that pasture. There were very few animals at that time that were left from the wild. Okay, so we've got this herd of bison that have never seen a lake. Their water has come out of a galvanized tub. Their food has fallen out of the back of a truck. Okay. Are they still bison? I mean, we didn't know. What are they going to do? Are they going to go down to the lake and drown? You know, get stuck in the mud? Here's a perfect example of what I was worried about. So when we fed those bison, now you remember we've got 75 bison in 150 acres. There was not much to graze. So when we fed them, we had a little trailer with a feed hopper on the back of it, and we'd drive through the pasture and drop cake, range cubes out of the back of that thing. So their food would fall out of this white trailer. What comes to a state park? Campers pulling trailers. Are they going to chase every camper down until they just fall over dead, waiting for the food to come out of it? We just really didn't know. There was a lot of things that we didn't know. And, you know, I'm being superintendent, if that were to happen, who's going to get blamed for it? So there was a lot of sleepless nights going on to this thing. But let me tell you, these guys came out and they hadn't forgotten anything. It's all in their system. They're in their DNA. They are bison. And when we turned them out, they flourished. They have done so well. These pictures are the day that we turned them out. And if you look at those pictures, they look okay, but they're not the greatest looking animals. They're not as healthy as they should be. You go out and look at them now, they are fat and happy, and, you know, slick. And I mean, it's just amazing the difference when we turn them loose, what they've been able to do. And as bad a year as we had last year with the drought, no rain whatsoever, they still look amazing. They are workers. It's pretty awesome. So now you see this, you know, you'll see this out in the prairie. So here's another little story that's pretty funny. when we first turned them out, I closed the park for a couple of days. Okay. I wanted to give them a chance to acclimate without having the pressures of the park visitors, right? So during this time, the gates were closed. And they were just able to wander around. One of my biggest concern was, how are they going to do with vehicles? They were used to that feed truck going around the prairie or pasture, but they didn't really know anything about vehicles. And, we get lots of motorcycles, and a big old motorcycle, loud Harley Davidson. I mean, that's kind of like a grizzly bear, I mean, are they going to attack it? Are they going to run from it? Who knows what's going to happen with motorcycles? That's one of my big concerns. So here we go. We're ready. We're opening up the gate. Guess who our first visitor was?
A Harley.
A motorcycle. Our first visitor was a motorcycle. Now, here's the irony. The irony is I took this picture from where I'm at right now, or where this picture's, I was standing there on the side of the road. I stopped him and I saw those animals. Those are some big bulls there. And I said, listen, dude, you're kind of our guinea pig. Said, how's your insurance? Is it good? Are you okay? How's that? How you gonna be all right? I got to talking to this guy, and Suzanne, I was telling you this. I grew up a few miles from here, not very far. I went to high school in Haltom City, Haltom High. Guess what our mascot was?
Buffalo.
A buffalo. Absolutely. That's where this guy was from.
Oh.
He was from my high school.
Oh my gosh.
He was older than I am, and I didn't know him, but it was, how ironic is that?
That is amazing.
So anyway, he was okay with being a guinea pig, so we took off, and I was there taking pictures just in case there's a big train wreck. I want to get it on, get on camera. They didn't care. It didn't bother them at all. Like I said, there's been no problems whatsoever. They have done fantastic. They were born for that. That's what they're all about. So now you got to wait for Bison to cross the road. We have Bison jams. It's pretty awesome. They like to hang out around the headquarters area, go down to the lake, hang out in the grass out on the prairie. This is where you're supposed to see bison, not behind that big fence with green ear tags. By the way, we got rid of the ear tags. Oh, well, I say that. We got rid of the green and orange ear tags. We do use a small little black one, and hopefully we'll be getting rid of that before too much longer.
I'm assuming they're all microchipped too.
They're not microchipped. We don't do microchips, but we do have it's a electronic ID. Okay. So it's a little button that goes in their ear, and we can read it that way.
So they're self-sustaining then?
Yeah, they are self-sustaining.
And how many are there in the herd now?
There are currently about 300 in the herd. This guy here, I like to see him. He's kind of hanging out there. So here's where we were. After 2011, the blue area is their original pasture. That's where they were, behind the big Jurassic Park fence. The area just south of the lake there, between the, I'm trying to explain this to people that can't see my red dot here. Between the blue pasture and the lake, that area is the new range that they have. Between that and the blue one, it gives them about 1,000 acres that they can roam on. So that's great, except for now, if you look at that blue area is what their new range is, and the green area is the park.
Wow. How many acres is the park?
The park is a total of almost 14,000 acres.
Oh my.
So we had a long way to go to get them out in the park. It took us a year to do this bottom part. The good thing is everything on the west side of the park is canyons. Goodnight chose that country for a reason, and mostly because those canyons made good fences.
Yeah, like a box canyon.
Yep.
Yeah. So
the whole western side of the park is basically just canyons. Now we do have some fences thrown in there different places, but basically there's not a whole lot of fencing on the west side, just on the north, south, and east side. And a lot of that was already existing. We had to go in and tighten it up and put some hot wire on it. You don't need that 11-foot tall fence. You know, there's no doubt a bison can jump a 6-foot fence. I've seen a bison jump a 6-foot fence. But if they're happy, they've got plenty to eat, plenty to drink, they're not going to mess with the fence. If it looks solid, it is solid. If they run out of grass or run out of water, you probably can't build a fence to keep them in. That's where you run into problems, or during the breeding season.
Yeah.
But we don't have hardly any issues with them going through fences at all. The only time they've ever gone through fences is when two bulls were fighting, and they just fought and ended up on the wrong side of the fence. They didn't even know they were doing it. They just, that's how strong they are.
What do you do during breeding season? Anything different?
No, we just keep an eye on them. Keep an eye on them. That's the main thing. So anyway, after 2011 release, we started immediately on the next phase, which is the rest of the park. And that's pretty much what we've done to date. In 2014, we were able to release them into the interior of the park. So now they don't have access to this finger on the eastern side, on the other side of a county road here. The red line is a county road. They can't access that, but they can access everything to the west of that county road. So they have about 12,000 acres that they can roam in through the campgrounds, on the trails, on the roads. I mean, you are in the bison habitat when you're at Caprock Canyon State Park. It's like being at Yellowstone, but you don't have to drive all the way up there. You know, and you're seeing Texas bison. You know, it's even better, right?
So are the yellow lines trails or unpaved roads?
Yellow lines are trails.
And red is paved road?
Red lines are pavement.
Okay.
Yellow lines are trails.
Okay.
So we've done a lot, and we still have a lot to do to restore our prairies. And we do have a few prairies. It's a lot of transition area, you know, from the high plains to the rolling plains. And so we've got a lot of rough canyons, and there's a lot of areas that are not real suitable for bison. They would have been bison wintering grounds, basically. But we do have some prairies. This is a picture of our prairie out front that we've restored. Now, it doesn't look like this today. The grass is almost nothing because of last year, but it has the potential to come back, and it will. But we've done a lot of mesquite juniper control. We restored native animals to the park. We've restored prairie dogs. We haven't brought back pronghorn yet. I put that picture in there hoping that we were going to do it. And it's on my top list of things to do, but I haven't been successful yet. We do proper land management. We burn. We do whatever it takes to make it, you know, successful. And that's how we move the bison around too. We don't have a lot of interior fences. And bison are not this magical beast that will take care of the land. They will overgraze just like anything else. If you have too many animals, it's very detrimental to the land, without a doubt, whether it be bison or cows or deer. So you have to manage, because we have a fixed number of acres. You know, they can't move somewhere else. They've got to stay in there. So we have to manage them. We have to keep their numbers in check. We have to, if you think historically, and you guys more than anybody will know this, how this land historically was grazed, okay? It wasn't year-round grazing. Those bison herds would come through in thousands, numbers of thousands, and they would eat it down to nothing, stomp it down, pee on it, poop on it, you know, drop seed, plant it, till it up, do it, the whole process, and then move on and not come back for a year or two. And that's how this land, all of these prairies, that's how they're meant to be managed. So the rotational grazing works great. The intensive grazing, the mob grazing, the cell grazing, whatever you want to call it, it works great if you can do it. But in this park scenario, we cannot do it. We cannot have those cross fences like that. So we had to figure out some other ways to do it. One of the things we do is use fire. We use patch burning. Well, with bison, the prairie dogs is another great example. Man, those bison will be all over those prairie dog downs because there's a lot of fresh growth coming up. Okay. So same with burning. You go burn a patch, those bison will find it and they'll camp on it. So you don't have to burn thousands of acres to do this or clear thousands of acres. You find a couple 100 acres over here and you burn it. The bison will make their way to it. They're grazing while they're going there. They're grazing while they're coming back to the next one. So you're just moving them around. And that's one of the tools that we use.
So before you move on, we have
Have there been any
that are relevant to this slide.
Observed environmental changes since the bison were introduced to the park?
Yes, there have. And I don't know if you guys could hear that. The question was, have there been any observed environmental changes to the park? And the changes are more like changes back as opposed to degradation. Mm-hmm. They're improvements. Because that land had been continuously grazed for decades. The prairies had been turned into cotton fields, so now what we're doing is we're turning it back into the native stuff, what it should have been like. And those bison are doing their job with their hoof action going in and where we haven't. So think about this. It became a park in the 70s, early 80s, has not been grazed since then. That's just as bad as overgrazing. So now you've got these bare grounds, bare spots that have not compacted, but have, well, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, where the rain continuously hits them and it forms a crust.
Oh.
Okay. So now the rain doesn't come in there. It causes erosion. There's no seed that can get in there. Nothing can grow. So these bison coming in a herd mentality are tearing that up. Okay, they're getting back to what they're supposed to be doing, and that's nature's tillers. And they're tilling that soil up. And so when we have rain, which last year, like I said, we didn't, but in a normal year, like this year, we're getting pretty good rainfall. We're starting to see grass grow in places where it hasn't grown in the past, the last several decades. So it is a fine line, let me tell you. You can swing that pendulum real fast the wrong way if you're not careful. So it's a chore for sure, but
Can we ask a question from out here?
So we did some research. We put some collars on a couple of animals to see where they went. They do run in herds. So if I've got a collar on one, I've got a collar on 30, I can see where the herds are going. This is about a month's worth of data. Shows what they were doing.
So the 300 some odd bison that are there, they break up into sub-herds?
Yes, oh, okay. They will. They'll break up into herds. It depends on what time of year it is, what they're doing. This time of year, they're getting ready to have the rut. The breeding season is about to kick off, so they're all together. After the rut, they'll split up. They'll go mama calves and mamas and calves and yearlings, and bulls will one off by themselves. And they just do different things depending on what time of the year it is. This shows you basically what we already knew, is that the bison love the prairies. The areas where it's really concentrated dots are prairies. The areas where it's sparse or nothing is rough landscape. So that rough landscape is covered by juniper mesquite. So that tells us what we need to do, and that restores more of this land back to the prairies or the rolling plains. That's what we're working on.
Okay, Donald, one question. People are trying to ask questions and we can't hear them. What do you think?
Well, I'm almost done, and then we can go through the questions and answer them that way. I don't know what else to do.
Okay.
Do you want to read some questions and we can answer them?
Well, no, I can't. I haven't been able to look at the questions. So we'll have to just wait, I think, until we can get onto the chat on the screen. And so Kate, I can't hear you, but have everybody put questions in chat, and Donald said he's almost done, and then we'll go through the questions that way.
There was one question on email. Did you get that one today?
Email? Oh, I can't get into it.
Okay, so a little bit about the park itself. We do have 28 miles of trails inside the park, and then we have a trailway, which is 65 miles long. that stretches through 3 different counties, 4 different counties. And then it's also part of the park as far as management, law enforcement, all that we have to do, everything just like the park itself. We're stretched out pretty thin. 13,960 acres in the park, and then the trailway adds another 1,350 acres. So we're, 15,000 acres total, what we are. We have some great views in the park. This is that western side I was telling you about with all the canyons.
Wow. That's so cool.
We have about 1,000-foot elevation drop inside the park.
So
From
is this between 287 and sort of?
Yeah, yeah, it is actually between, if you know where Esteline is, which is the speed trap on 287. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
We're pretty much due west of there, about 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's where the trailway comes up to 287.
It does, yeah.
This is the extension sort of the Paladuro Canyon system, is it not?
This is, it's part of the Caprock Escarpment. So the Paladuro Canyon is a series of canyons on the Caprock Escarpment. Huge canyon, second biggest canyon in North America. And then Caprock Canyons is a smaller series of canyons off of the Caprock Escarpment. We're just right there. Some people would like to say that we are part of the Paladuro Canyon. Some people don't. Me personally, I think that there's I think there's a little bit of a divide between us. We have the Little Red River that runs through the park. Actually, we have the North Prong and the South Prong of the Little Red River. They come together on the eastern side of the park and become the Little Red River. They flow downstream about 5 or 6 miles, and then it dumps into the Prairie Dog Fork, which is what runs through Paladuro Canyon.
And then how does those copper breaks tie into this at all? It looks similar.
It looks similar, and it's, it's kind of off of the Red River stuff too.
Yeah.
I mean, we the 3 of us all kind of consider us. We consider each other Red River Parks.
Yeah.
So we're related that way for sure. And we do have winter in the park as well.
Oh wow, that's a cool picture.
Wow.
And I believe that does it.
1970s is when this was.
It was the late 70s when it was acquired. It was actually opened in the early to mid 80s.